The
The
emergency
readings
lights cast
indicate that the
everything in
anomaly is
that particular
stabilizing.
shade of
We
red
should be
that
able to
made
proceed with
even
the
water
mission
look like
shortly.
blood, which Commander James Hartley thought was perhaps appropriate given the circumstances. The ceasefire had been called 43 hours ago, and he still couldn't quite believe it was real. 7 years of war didn't just end with a signed document transmitted across quantum channels. 7 years of war ended with exhausted soldiers sitting in rubble, wondering what came next. The neutral zone's trading station, what remained of it anyway, groaned under its own weight. Hartley stepped carefully through the debris, his boots crunching on shattered plexi steel that had once been observation windows. Through the gaps in the hull, he could see the debris field stretching for thousands of kilometers, a glittering cemetery of ships both human and Zeleny. Some still leaked atmosphere, creating brief auroras as oxygen met the trace particles of the nebula beyond. "Sir, the Zeleny delegation will arrive in 20 minutes, Lieutenant Torres announced, her voice carrying through his earpiece. "Their queen is actually coming personally. Their queen is coming here, to this wreck." Hartley looked around at what passed for their conference room, a former restaurant that now featured an artistic arrangement of exposed conduits and a table made from welded hull plating. Someone had tried to make it presentable by covering the worst burns with a tarp that proclaimed "Galaxy's best neutrally sourced coffee" in 17 languages. "Affirmative, sir. Queen Lyreley herself. Intelligence suggests she's been personally overseeing their fleet movements for the last 2 years." Hartley rubbed his eyes. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, fueled by stimulants that the medical officer insisted were perfectly safe but made everything taste purple. "Well, at least we won't have to worry about the wine selection. Pretty sure the wine storage got vented into space somewhere around year 3 of this mess. Actually, sir, Corporal Chen found a bottle of something green in what used to be the kitchen. He says it's either Zeleny ceremonial liquor or industrial coolant. The label is half melted." "Fantastic. Nothing says let's discuss peace like potential poisoning." When the Zeleny shuttle docked 17 minutes later, Hartley stood as straight as his exhausted body would allow. He'd managed to find a uniform that only had minor scorch marks, which counted as formal wear these days. The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded distinctly unhealthy, and then she entered. Queen Lyreley of the Zeleny Empire was not what he'd expected. The propaganda had painted her as a cold, calculating destroyer of worlds. The intelligence reports suggested a brilliant military mind wrapped in aristocratic arrogance. What walked through that broken airlock was a woman who looked like she'd personally carried the weight of every dead soldier on both sides for the entire war. She stood tall. Zeleny were generally a hand's breadth taller than humans, with the distinctive elongated, pointed ears that marked her species. They twitched slightly as she surveyed the devastation, a nervous gesture perhaps, or maybe just processing the spectacular amount of damage they'd all managed to achieve. Her violet eyes moved across the room, taking in the conference table, the exposed wiring, and the tarp with its coffee advertisement, which chose that moment to lose one corner and flap sadly in the recycled air. "Commander Hartley," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality that all Zeleny had but tempered with exhaustion that was utterly universal. "I would say it's a pleasure, but I believe we've moved past the need for such pleasant fictions." "Your Majesty," he replied with a slight bow that his back immediately protested. "Welcome to what's left of Neutral Station 7. I'd offer you our finest accommodations, but I'm fairly certain our finest accommodations are currently floating past that window." She looked where he pointed, and indeed, what appeared to be half of a luxury suite drifted by, its bed still somehow made with military precision despite being in the vacuum of space. "At least your housekeeping standards remain intact," she observed, and he could have sworn he saw the ghost of a smile touch her lips. "Shall we discuss how to stop turning perfectly good space stations into modern art installations?" They sat at the makeshift table, her royal guards taking positions that somehow managed to look dignified despite one having to stand next to a sparking power coupling that occasionally shot blue flames. Hartley's own security detail tried to match their professionalism, though Sergeant Webb was definitely eyeing the sparking coupling with concern. "Before we begin," Lyreley said, producing a data pad that looked pristine enough to have come from a pre-war museum, "I should inform you that my government's position is that this war has become—" She paused, those distinctive ears twitching again, "catastrophically stupid." Hartley, who had been preparing for diplomatic doublespeak and careful negotiations, nearly choked on his own surprise. "I'm sorry, could you repeat that? My translator must be malfunctioning." "Catastrophically stupid," she repeated, enunciating each word with the care of someone who had practiced this phrase. "I believe that's the correct human term. My advisors suggested counterproductive to mutual prosperity. But that doesn't quite capture the magnitude of our collective idiocy, does it?" "No," Hartley agreed, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been tight for 7 years. "It really doesn't. We've spent enough resources to terraform 17 planets on turning perfectly good stations into abstract sculptures." 18 planets, she corrected. "I had the figures calculated. 18 habitable worlds, or alternatively, one truly spectacular theme park." She pulled up a holographic display from her pad, showing the economic projections. The numbers were so catastrophically large that they'd had to invent new terms for the denominations. A theme park. Hartley found himself genuinely curious despite everything. "My younger sister's suggestion. She's 12 in your years and maintains this entire conflict could have been avoided if we just built the galaxy's most epic water slide complex instead." Lyreley's ears drooped slightly. "I'm beginning to think she might have been our best strategic advisor." The tension in the room, which had been thick enough to cut with a plasma torch, began to ease slightly. Even the guards seemed to relax marginally, though whether from the absurdity or exhaustion was hard to tell. "So," Hartley said, leaning forward and immediately regretting it as the table creaked ominously, "you're proposing what exactly?" "Something radical," she replied, her violet eyes meeting his directly. "Instead of a traditional ceasefire where we retreat to our corners and glare at each other across the neutral zone, I propose we work together to fix this mess. Joint reconstruction efforts, human and Zeleny working side by side. You want our species to work together, after everything." He gestured vaguely at the devastation around them. "We've proven quite thoroughly that we're excellent at destroying things together," she said, that ghost of a smile returning. "Perhaps we might try building instead. Besides, do you have any idea how much paperwork a traditional peace treaty requires? My scribes tell me we'd need 17 years just to properly document the grievances. I'd rather spend that time actually fixing things." The sparking power coupling chose that moment to shoot a particularly impressive burst of blue flame, causing everyone except Lyreley to flinch. She merely glanced at it with the resignation of someone who'd seen too much to be bothered by minor electrical fires. "Your proposal has merit," Hartley admitted, his tactical mind already working through the implications. "But our peoples have been killing each other for 7 years. How do we just stop?" "By giving them something more important to do," she said simply. "Survival tends to override grudges. We rebuild together or we collapse separately. The mathematics are quite clear. Even if my sister's